I need a scar story. Tell me a scar story.
All right. Well, there's plenty of scar stories, but I was
They go so deep. They're very deep.
there. You go.
There's many of them. They're very deep.
One you can't see, obviously, because it's underneath the headphones. Is there's a scar, linear scar on my ear. And
Only an architect describes a scar as linear. Give me a break.
there you go.
I have a curvilinear scar over here.
Well, depending as if I'm standing upright, it is vertical. But
But if you're hunched over the drafting table, yeah.
yeah. But my linear scar, how did I get my linear scar? So, kids and their BMXing back in the day.
That's what we did.
Oh, totally. And I jumped one of the jumps.
As one does.
As one does. And the jump came apart as I was hitting it. So
it was a wooden ramp. I see.
it was
held together with staples.
No, it was a couple of found CMU blocks that we just stacked up and put the board on there. I mean, we don't check. We didn't have OSHA there to like double check to make sure it was stable after each run. And of course, here I am making my run, and I had like the heaviest of all of the bikes. Mine was like one of those steel. It was a British bike. It was called a Royal Enfield. I don't know if you've ever heard of them before.
I've heard of them. Yeah, they make motorcycles, don't they?
They do make motorcycles too, but they also made BMXs back in the day. And mine was all red seat, red handlebars, red, the red mag wheels. And so, I jump it, and of course it comes apart. So I basically hit the ground. Well, the next guy behind me had already started his run.
And you became a speed bump?
And so my head was down, and he comes swinging by, hits me in the head with the metal
pedals,
and the nice serrated edged pedal, and it hits me, and my head goes sideways, my ear tears open, and
oh man. So many good BMX stories from the day. It's funny you say there's no OSHA. There was no parents around. Like there was nobody ever going to check this kind of the safety rating. And now it's like
not at all. Yeah.
The hovering helicopter parents, right? Who are just like, that we didn't buy that ramp from we didn't purchase that ramp from a reputable dealer and make sure that it has a full-on safety certifications. It's like we used to build ramps out of some piece of wood that we found and CMU blocks. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's just like walking by, somebody put their garbage out, and they're like, ooh, that'll make a great ramp.
Yep.
Whether it would or wouldn't, which of course most of the time wouldn't. But
it got you in the air, man.
It got me in the air. I went tumbling over. And when I hit the ground, I'm like hands on the ground, knees on the ground. I'm like pushing myself back up, and my head is just at the right height to get
pedal height.
Boom.
Clocked
with the pedal. I was just like
terrible. You said you had the heaviest bike. It's funny, you wish you had that bike now. Oh, right? Like that bike would just be worth so much.
Oh yeah.
I watch these people who restore old PK Rippers and Dynos and GTs and Redlines from back in the day, right? Real BMX days.
Yeah.
And they're worth like thousands of dollars now. Yeah. And I wish I had saved my Super Goose from back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
I had a Redline that was stolen. But early on, when I just started, I was 5th grade, I think, I started BMX. My dad took me to the bike shop. And he's like, you build whatever bike you want. And we went to this little bike shop in this eastern San Diego County bike shop in this little town called Alpine, and where we lived. And I picked out this frame, right? And it was like the curved metal frame and the heavy yellow mags. And the guy who was an old dude at the bike shop, and he was like, "Are you sure? Like, is this what you really want?" And I was like, I was just going by what it looked like, right? I wasn't going by anything else. Had pedal brakes, like all of the stuff that was old school compared to, the BMX bikes of the day. Because there's all these other like really simple line frames, and everyone was going with spoke wheels. And it was like, I was going the opposite direction of everybody else. And I learned very quickly after the bike was built that like, this was not a cool bike, man. It was not cool at all.
No. People used to make fun of it because it was all red. all red.
I went for a green frame with yellow wheels. It was like the lemon lime version of your cherry cola. I had the lemon lime bike.
Here comes 7-Up Troxel.
That's right. And I did think I had a yellow seat too. I color coordinated the mags to the seat.
Did you have
yellow grips?
I was going to say, did you have yellow grips? Did you have any of the pads? Like crossbar pad or
no? Okay, so pads? This bike had all the curved frame. Curved.
Oh, okay, yeah. So
there weren't pads for my bike.
And let me
it wasn't until I got into the next town, the next grade, that I actually figured things out and had a cool chromoly tubed, red line bike. It was pretty sweet.
And tell me if it didn't matter if you had pads or not. They didn't help.
No,
they didn't help.
Nope.
I mean,
no, your bike was a crotch bat. I mean, no matter what.
The worst. I'll tell you the worst. You want another scar one on that BMX?
Deep scars, deep cuts
here. So, oh my gosh, this one's just. So we had this shopping mall near our house, and because of Florida's flat as all get out, but for some reason, all of the parking lots and stuff were, had hills and stuff on them. Don't know why. I mean, we're flat
drainage.
Whatever.
For fun.
Probably. Well, yeah, because here was the fun is it was raining and all of the pavement was slick. And a buddy of mine was out in front of me, and for some reason he slammed on his brakes, skidded sideways. But when he skidded sideways, he lost control and he went down. Well, I'm like right here, and I'm
right.
And of course, what do? I go right into him. I go up over the handlebars. The bike's gone. I'm fly over him. I land on the ground on my hands and knees, wet pavement, and I'm sliding down the hill, shredding. And like,
meat grinder.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And then of course, what did we feel like doing? It was just like, oh, I'm hungry. So you remember,
you know what I think of when I look at my palms after I've slid down asphalt?
Oh yeah. I've got, bloody all over the place. I even hit my head and didn't realize that I had blood dripping
because
from
there
my
were
head.
no helmets.
Because there's no helmets. It's like no one's going to wear helmets, even if there were.
No.
God, what was it? Was it Cracker Barrel? It was. Do you remember? I don't know if you remember in the shopping malls, the shopping mall that used to like hand out cheese and sausage.
No, I don't.
You don't remember? Oh my gosh. I was in Florida.
Okay.
But I'm pretty positive it was something. Somebody, anybody watching or listening or commenting, please let me know if you guys remember it. It was red, checkerboard. I feel like it was Cracker Barrel before it was Cracker Barrel, the shop. I mean, the restaurant. It was like this place that sold basically meats and cheeses, which, sure. And so I was like, you know what? I'm hungry. I'm bleeding. I want some meat and cheese. So,
oh man.
So I had to go and then I walk up the lady who was like, outside holding like the platter, because they like stand outside and like, free samples.
It's like Wetzel's Pretzels today.
Oh yeah.
They're just giving away free samples.
Samples. And so I walk up, they're looking at me so horrified. They're like, "Are you okay? Should we call, security?
I just want some meats and cheeses.
I just want some meats and cheeses, man.
Yeah, have another.
Exactly. Oh, I had like a whole. It was so funny because like
they feel sorry for you and they give you a bunch or not?
Oh, I had a handful, but the problem is that my hands were so bloody. It's just enjoy that, everyone.
I'm going to enjoy the visual. Let's enjoy the visual.
Exactly.
Yeah. You pull out any old pictures. If you send them my way, we'll put them in the show.
We didn't have pictures. I mean, could you just imagine how horrified people would be if we had iPhones back in the day when we were, hellions,
doing the things we were not allowed to do.
Doing the things that we were not allowed to do. And
right.
Although you said it's just like, the parents didn't know where we were. What was
didn't care.
What was the
didn't know, didn't care.
Didn't know, didn't care. But what was the one? How could you tell where everybody was? If you were out looking for your friends, how could you tell where they were?
Good question. I don't know how could you tell?
Because all of their bikes were in that person's front yard.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, totally.
It's like
totally. They would just be a pile of bikes
it's just
on
like,
the lawn.
Man, I wonder where my friends are. You can't like, it's pre-texting, so I can't text them like, hey, where are you? It's just like, I walk around the neighborhood, it's just like, oh, there they are. They're over at Jimmy's.
Art of dismounting the bicycle, right? Because it became like how can you get off and ghost ride the bike and see how far it goes until it crashes into something, right? But it was all about like distance, like how far will it go by itself, and then how cool could you look walking away and not look at the bike because you knew it was just like this perfect dismount, right? And as you walk toward the door of the house, it was, I mean, straight out of Stranger Things.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. Oh, ghost riding. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it was so funny to just like, you hop off or you like side saddle a little bit, and then you give it the shove,
give it a little kick.
Yeah, exactly. It just keeps on going, and it's just like, and then oh my God, you just brought up a memory. So I might as well tell it. Yeah. So I did that, and I like launched the bike, right? So I'm side saddle, and I was the first one to have like the, like the little fork. What are they called? Pegs. Yeah. So, and for both the front and the back. And
those pegs were not for doing tricks. They were for hauling friends.
Oh, you totally. Exactly. So I get off and I launch the bike off and I'm push it and it's moving and it's going straight for my friend Jimmy's dad's Suburban. And yes, there was red marks all over his blue Suburban.
Oh, poor Jimmy. And because Jimmy would get the flack for that, wouldn't he?
No, because Jimmy's dad was home and Jimmy's dad heard the thump. He heard the hit and came out, and
he knew immediately.
He was retired military, and we never forgot it.
As you're wearing your army shirt.
I'm wearing my army shirt.
You know what it's like. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
The PTSD kicks in immediately when the BMX bike hits the Suburban.
It was so funny. It's like, I grew up in Florida, and I don't think that I had a a native born Floridian friend.
Everyone was a transplant.
Everyone was a transplant. He was a New Yorker and, had that New York attitude, ex-military, and all this other stuff. And so when he came out and he saw the dent in it wasn't a dent. It was more of like a crease, but it had red paint across it.
Oh man. Good times. Well, that was a fun little side step there. That was a good way to kick off the episode here.
Yeah. So,
we're recording an episode.
So I did have something in mind to talk about a little bit.
Right.
I don't know if this is a full show thing, but it is something definitely that we've touched on. But it was something that, speaking about kids and speaking about, how, we used to, parents didn't really care where we were or what we were doing and stuff, and how we are very helicopter parent now. And let's be honest, the parents, we are the parents. We are the kids of the parents who didn't care, but now because they didn't care, we overcare. Yeah.
The pendulum has swung.
Pendulum has swung. That was a hard way of saying that, but okay.
Right.
So there's this lady on a local Facebook group for the Grosse Pointe area, and she was reaching out and she was asking, hey, my son is he's an architecture student, and his summer internship fell through. Does anybody know of anything? Which is great. Reach out and, try to find some contacts. That is fantastic.
Use your network. Use your social network. Yeah.
However, I will say this. And so this is where, I had to step in. I looked at it. I
had to step in.
I had to step in because the very first comment that then started a conversation between these two people, the mother and this person, was, oh, well, does it matter if it's paid or not? And so then it was exactly.
It's like lights going up. Wait, what?
And so then it was, okay, there was just, then she'd responded, experience is really more, if they pay, great, but if really about the experience. I'm like, time out here. No. And so I had to jump in, and I was just like, please, this is, we can't keep
far enough.
I was like, we can't keep perpetuating this. It's like, please don't allow your son to take a job for free. And then I kind of went off on a tangent, because then they started, some of the people who were commenting, which clearly were architects, or worked in the business. They started, they kind of were coming at me, and I'm like, look, we all know that every firm who hires an intern, a lot of times, or most all of the time, they are doing work, whether it's, graphic work or something like that, that is something of either an endeavor, a pursuit, a proposal, a project that they're getting paid for. And so if you're doing labor for somebody who's getting paid for your labor, you should get paid too.
Of
period.
Course.
And,
oh my gosh.
And so after all of that, I kind of had to, DM the mom and say, look, I didn't mean to start this, but look, I am very passionate about this. I do not believe an unpaid internship. Please do not advise your son to take it in. I was like, I just recently moved here. I've got a network of people, but I don't, know that many people, but I will help your son find a job that pays him if that be the case. And
seriously.
And so we had this, conversation. It's just like, why? And so it wasn't necessarily because we already know.
It's amazing how fast it went to that, right? It was
it was, I was like, how, everybody thinks
people are like, these are sharks in the water, man. And they're looking for fresh meat.
It's just like, look,
I'll take him if he works for free. Jeez.
Well, that was kind of like, it's just like, does, money matter? I'm like, yeah, of course it does.
Does money matter to you? Jeez.
Do you work for free?
Wow.
This whole notion of it's the honor of the experience.
Right.
Honor. Where's the honor in that? So many times we have clients who don't pay us for a long period of time. Where's the honor in that? Where's your honor? Where's your honor when you're crying about paying your consultants, or paying your staff, or paying yourself? Where's the honor in that? It's the same thing as you don't want to set this bad precedence.
When you are trying to avoid paying the lowest paid person in the firm, that sets a very dangerous precedent.
Yes.
That shows you that the lack of business acumen, to where you can't even afford the cheapest person in the office, and instead try to kind of rewrite the narrative to say it's an honor for you to be able to participate in this. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense. If anybody actually applied their thinking to that, even if that's what happened to them,
right.
That doesn't matter. That doesn't make it okay, even if that's what their experience was.
That is the point. Okay, somebody did it to you. It's that old adage of, it's just like, who hurt you? And obviously we all have been through this whole who have hurt you. I've never.
Talk about scars, Cormac. We're still on the scar theme here.
Exactly. It's just like, so I will say that I have never worked a free job. Ever.
Me either.
I mean, sometimes it might feel like it because the payment comes a lot later.
I would never have. Well, that's true. But that, it wouldn't have even crossed my mind that was something acceptable to do. Right.
It wasn't even practiced. When my first internships were in Montgomery, Alabama, and they had even I think I told this story. He'd go he was doing hand drafting, and yes, we are that old.
Did you ride to the office on your BMX bike?
I would have loved to, but so doing the hand drafting, guy came up to me, looked at it, asked me to untape it from my desk, and balled it up and told me it was horrible. And it was just like, it was. And then thankfully he sat down and he went through everything and, showed me how to do it right. showed me how he goes,
while you were in shock,
while I was in shock, because I will say,
demoralizing.
It was at the time I didn't understand the different sizes, weights, and everything else of all of the different rapidograph pens, the double aught, and all of these other things, and went through, gave me a tutorial on how to like clean and ink pens and how to like actually like prepare a sheet, especially because apparently left-handed people have this problem with getting the ink and all that other stuff up against, the side of your hand. And I am notorious with that. And so, showed me everything. But you know what? Even though he crumbled up my paper, I still got paid for it. I still got paid for it.
Yeah.
Because they were getting paid for it. In that church that I did the floor plans for still stands today.
Yeah.
But it was something that I've never thought that we should perpetuate this practice of, and we do know that a lot of like the starchitects love to, and I hope they don't do it anymore, but love to, you're working for me for the honor of it. And so you won't,
privilege.
You won't get paid, but God, won't it look great on your resume to say that you worked for Evan Troxel Extraordinaire?
Speaking of starchitects.
Exactly. Speaking of egos.
Oh, man.
But I mean, oh my Lord, it just so turned quickly against me. And I was just like, people, please, just because you did it doesn't mean that it's right. And this is
don't keep it going.
And I even said, I even like,
this is like totally antithesis to the whole idea of paying it forward. This is
yeah. No, it's
my gosh.
It's not paying it forward. It's paying it back.
Yeah.
I got abused. I am going to abuse. Why? We are in such a crisis of staffing right now. We know
architects are cheapskates. I'll just say it. It's crazy. I mean, you look at like avoiding paying for software licensing fees, keeping computers around for 10 years, like the productivity, not valuing the hours that we spend on like just rote things that should be fully automated. Like there's just so many examples of that. And it's just like, and yet you'll choose to nickel and dime an intern, right?
Right. Yeah.
Makes no sense.
Exactly. And, it's funny is that we actually started with these like scar stories, but I mean, it really is. It's these scars. It is these scars that still linger in the profession. That's really kind of keeping the profession down. People who say, oh my God, there's conversation about, going back to the office, more and more hours or more and more days. And there's a lot of people who are up and I'm saying, I don't know if I can do that. And it's not that they don't want to work. It's they have been so used to a different kind of working. And this is kind of a little tangent here, but they've been used to a different kind of working that people need. And this really is a conversation that I've had with a lot of different firms, not just, my firm, but other people's firms that are really struggling with this dynamic of, the hybrid working, the remote working, the full butts and seats, 5 days a week working, and trying to find that balance between all of those different things, because even people who are seasoned have gotten into a lifestyle now that is different from pre-COVID era, that they're not really sure that they really need to go back and be, 100% button seats.
This is 100% about surveillance management. I mean, that's 100% what it is. I mean, this is about the justification of hierarchy.
Yes.
Of people who are higher up in that hierarchy, making sure, in air quotes, that people are doing the work that they're supposed to be doing to justify their position. It's not to justify the people who are doing the work's position. The work either gets done or it doesn't, period. It doesn't matter where you're sitting when that happens. It either happens or it doesn't. But to justify the position of people who need to make sure that somebody else is working does not make any sense at all. And this is kind of a corporate disease that happens. It's not just in architecture either.
Absolutely. And that is like 100% exactly the issues that, how do I know that Evan is working? I mean, I don't know if Evan's working because I don't see Evan's working here. There's this struggle, and the struggle is real. But the struggle of, how do we mentor? How do we mentor in a hybrid environment, or how do we mentor in a work from home environment? Now, I get that. I trust me, because I've lived that struggle. But there are ways around that. There are creative ways around that too. Having open office hours, where essentially, and I think I've talked about this before, but where you essentially just log on. You're in Oregon, I'm in Michigan, somebody else is in Maryland, and we're all working on the same project together. We all log on. You may say, hey guys,
Zoom room, open a Zoom
room, and you're just there. And if somebody has like a question, or if you and I are talking about something, and we've got a couple of interns that are, working with us, or some recent graduates, or whoever, and they hear the conversation, it is very much very similar to like the dialogue that we would have if we were sitting next to each other in the office. And that we learn a lot from osmosis of just listening to other conversations, right?
Sure.
Or listening to how somebody conducts themselves on a phone call, or anything else, or just the simple fact that, hey, I'm clicking and I'm working on something, and Evan, you've asked me to do these details, and I start doing these details. But since we have this open office, this open Zoom room, here we are. I was like, oh, wait, hold on. Let me at least show you what I'm working on. Is this exactly what you're asking me to do? It's a lot easier, because I have found that if you don't have that kind of like open, free exchange dialogue, a lot of interns don't really know what to ask, and so they don't ask, and that's okay.
Yeah, that there's an issue there though, right? Where it's like this, they don't want to appear like they don't know.
Right.
And there's also this weird thing in architecture where everybody always knows all the answers. And so there's this kind of, they're scared, right? There's a fear there too.
Right.
And so if you set, because what I absolutely don't want to come across as is that in-person meeting doesn't matter, because
right.
It does, but the office is a tool. The office is not shouldn't just be the given framework to get work done, because obviously it's not.
Right.
It used to be a given framework for how work is done, and now it isn't anymore. And to force fit work back into that framework doesn't make sense for everybody. Right. It might make sense for some people more than others. It definitely makes sense at certain times more than others. It definitely makes sense on different phases, potentially more than others, right? But again, like the space is a tool. Right. And so what resources are available there that make sense for people to come to do the thing, and then disperse and do the other things, right? Like that. Absolutely. To me, it just makes sense. And we have the ability to plan for all of that. And planning is usually the success of a project or not. Right. It's not anything else. Like the planning is, we figure all this out, and then we go off and we do the work. And if we figure it all out together, or we figure it out in a Zoom room virtually, like it doesn't matter to me. Like, but use the tool for what it's best for.
Absolutely.
I saw a post earlier on LinkedIn from Kanoa. I think it was Federico Negro over at Kanoa, talking about the different types of offices. And there's either like the really badass office, which provides everything, like food, beverages, all the types of spaces that you need, all the resources you need. Or there's the extremely flexible office that is like super utilitarian, and it's just like this, you jump in, you jump out, right? So it's like, those are two extremes. The ones in the middle are going away, is what he's saying, especially in urban areas. Like, it's like, what do we do with this space? It's not very useful. People aren't showing up. People are supposed to show up, but they don't. And supposed to, right? Because somebody said so.
Right.
And even though it doesn't necessarily make sense for the kind of work that they're doing. So the middle kinds of offices that it's like real squishy don't make a lot of sense anymore. And people are struggling to figure out what to do because they're spending a lot of money on them.
Yeah.
Right. So the struggle is real, but really I think it comes down to the indecision about what to do with the space, because it isn't like it used to be.
Right.
And instead of evolving, we're still hanging on really tightly.
So, okay, I don't know if you and I actually walked into one of those extreme, far extreme offices that had almost everything there.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Are you talking about shop?
I wasn't
Which
going to
one are you
name,
talking about?
I wasn't going to name names.
Why not?
But the thing that I worry about, yes, but the thing that I would worry about is places like that have like everything. It's almost like you don't need to go anywhere. You can stay here all the time.
Right.
And then you look at the faces of the people who
doesn't
are
mean you
there.
have to. It doesn't mean you have
It
to,
doesn't
right?
mean you
Well,
have
there is still a architectural
That's
component to this.
That's where
for
I
sure.
was kind of going.
But it's in tech too. It was in tech. It was like
yeah,
everyone had a breakfast bar and a lunch bar and
Oh my
a
gosh,
beverage and a coffee bar and a beer bar and a ping pong table. And it's like at some point those really surface things were considered perks, and then everybody like never used them, right? And it was like, what's all this? What are we spending money on all this stuff for? So
right.
yeah, there's different levels of nuance within that argument as well.
Well, and the thing is, like, you have an open office, you have a ping pong table, or you have a pool table, like right in the middle of the office. And you have other people who, ooh, I need a break. I'm going to go play pool. And then you're like right next to a cubicle of somebody who's trying to actually do work.
Right. Yeah.
Really, dude?
Then there needs to be a rule about when people can use the ping pong table. And it's just like, okay,
then it's
well,
just
I'm
like,
not going to play if there's a rule. Like,
right. And then it's just like, well, then what's the point? What's the point of having one there?
Right.
Although I will say the firm that I wasn't going to name, but you named, what I found astonishing is and even your old firm had it too, which I was always so like, amazed when I went into that office to have a coffee bar and a nitro coffee bar, cold brew,
coffee tap, right.
and all of these things. It was just like, what? Like we've got like old, like pump coffee things, and it's
welcome to Denny's.
Exactly. Hold on a minute.
Right.
It's just like, you wanted ashes in your hash brown.
Right.
You
had that version.
Exactly. We had that version. It's just like, oh, so flavor, you just want to like, ooh, you take the drink of coffee and so, yeah. But, man, I look at him as just like, is that a red flag for you're expecting them to be there more than they should be? Or is that, oh, this is really nice because, you have some cool perks. Oh, Friday afternoons, you can open up the kegs and you can start drinking or beer 30, throughout the week and stuff. And I'm always thinking to myself, who are the people who want to stay at the office drinking beer with their colleagues when they could be on their way home?
Or meeting their real friends.
Or meeting their real friends or family or whoever to have that beer somewhere else.
It is a bit forced sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, and then the forced...
We're a family.
The forced family fun days. Those are always great too. It's like...
We're a forced family fun.
Yeah, it's like, bring your family into the office so we can all have, a good time with all of the family. And you think about it, and those people... you bring your wife.
Family's like, I don't want to go to your office.
It's just like, well, why do I want to go there? No.
Right.
I don't want that.
Yeah. Right.
God, I love it.
I have another topic here, and it's something that you sent me, which was, first it was a video by one of my favorite YouTubers, the Spirited Man, Van Neistat.
Yes.
And the title of this video, I'll put a link to it in the show notes, is Why Only Some of Us Think in Pictures. And then you you sent me another video, a TED Talk.
Yes.
Called The World Needs All Kinds of Minds by Temple Grandin.
Yes.
I want you to set this up because I don't want to read your long ass text message here. It was very long, but it was very insightful. So you want to set this up?
Yeah. So we share a lot of very similar YouTube channels. And you actually had turned me on to the Spirited Man channel, and both Van and Casey Neistat, fantastic YouTubers, do beautiful content. I mean, honestly, for people who are not architects, they have a very interesting sensibility. And so this particular clip that I sent you about that he was talking about this audiobook and podcast that he was listening to from Temple Grandin. And she was talking about, because, and if for people who haven't seen like the movie or anything else, she is as she'll even say in the TED Talk, a high spectrum autistic thinker, but she thinks in pictures. And it started Van thinking very much the same, thinking about the way that he thinks. And it was very
kind of explaining something that he's always kind of intuitively known, but didn't know how to maybe put words to, or even like it wasn't a complete thought for him. It seemed like until he heard the podcast that she was on.
Right. Cause in a way,
read her book.
Yeah. Cause in a way, what it was is he was always questioning the way he thought. And was he stupid, or was he special, or was he this, or was he that? Because he never really understood.
Because he was definitely different.
Because he thought differently. And what was interesting about that is I started to do a little bit of self-analysis on that as well, because I very much think in pictures. And it's interesting because I'll write things down. I'm not writing things down to remember them. I'm writing things down to visualize the content of what I'm hearing, so I can kind of understand, and my mind will start to think about things. I need to hear, listen, absorb, unravel, repeat in a way to visualize, and then kind of like rewrap it into my head. And so there's like all these different processes that I go through that are actually could be seen as slow, and it's not necessarily that. It's a way for me to visually understand and have my mind wrap around the visual understanding of anything and everything.
Yeah.
And so I might as well be, like open up hold on, let me get the couch.
Please lay down. Tell me about your father.
Well, but I mean, I will be 100% honest with you that reading was always a struggle for me. Reading wasn't a struggle for me to understand it. I was slow at reading because I reread things over and over to visualize what was being said, or I would write down what I'm reading so that I can visualize what is being said in the book. Or I would even do pictures of what I'm reading to understand and visualize what is being said, so that I can understand it in a way that it actually lasts longer. And I will give you an even further insight on that, is I recorded everything that I studied for the ARE. I read it out loud and recorded it and re-listened to it. And that's when I was actually successful at studying and passing the ARE, is when I was just reading it and trying to go off of it and then go into it and, try to remember, oh, what did I read, and all this other stuff. But when I set it in my brain, because I processed it, reprocessed it, rolled it through, whatever churn that I have, and then kind of like represented it to myself through my understanding, through what I now understand, now all of that stuff is stuck in my head. All of that stuff is things that I remember.
Not mine, man. It's all gone.
Yeah. Well,
but the interesting thing about that to me is that when I write stuff down, it's so that I can take a picture of it with my brain.
Yes.
Because how many times have I gone back? I was doing it today. I'm like looking for something I wrote down 6 months ago in my notebook. I know what it looks like.
Oh yeah.
And I'm just looking for the page that matches the picture that's in my brain. And that's why I write it down. It's not so that I can remember it. It's not even necessarily so that I can find it later, but it's so that I can turn it into a picture, because I remember things by pictures too.
My wife she's always dumbfounded about like my mechanical abilities. Where I told her, we listened to the Van Neistat thing that we're going to be posting. And she was just like, that explains you a lot. It really does explain you a lot. She's like,
and she's very different, right?
And she's very different, as a teacher,
she's a word-based
person. Very word-based. And so, she was just like, because you she's like, you're not a mechanic, but you're mechanically inclined. You can look at things and you can see, it's like if I'm going to take apart something. And I remember the very first time I ever did a set of drum brakes. I mean, as well as I do, because, you're a mechanic as well. Like, that drum brakes are a pain. They're a pain in the butt because you've got all of these different springs that cross over and, you've got them that, they sit on the hydraulic actuators and all of this other stuff. And so you have to put them back together the exact same way you take them apart or they don't work, period.
Right.
And for some reason, I took my old TR7, I pull the drum off and I'm looking at it and I just sat there and I looked at it for a while, staring at the brake, staring at all of the crossovers, all of the pistons, all of everything, just looking at it, taking a mental picture of it. And then I took it apart. And I set everything down, essentially, the way that I saw it up there. And I set everything down and laid it all out. And then I cleaned it all off and I changed the shoes. And then I put everything back together. And yes, did I cross the springs over and put them in the wrong direction? I did, because I inverted the two wrong springs. When I realized it as I was, trying to bleed the brakes and that they weren't actuating, I know what I did. And then I took it all apart and I swapped the two springs around and I put it back together.
And it's not just what it looks like, but it's you also understand how it works by looking at it.
Exactly.
Yes.
I understand the mechanics behind it. Like, okay, if I depress the brake, the brake is going to, send the hydraulic pressure to this, to this cylinder. And this cylinder is going to then push the little actuator as this little actuator is going to
this, then that, right? Cause
exactly.
and effect.
The cause and effect. And that literally explains the whole process of my mind is the cause and effect. It's like, okay, if I do this, what is going to happen next?
Right.
And I use that as a training tool when I'm teaching any of the people that I'm mentoring. Is like, I always teach them the cause and effect. Okay, if you do that, they're like, oh, is this wrong? Like, no, I'm never going to say something is wrong. But what I want you to do is I want you to think about, if you do that, what's next and next and next and next and next.
Yeah, you're kind of playing out the mechanics
in
your mind in like an animation form, or, you're thinking through all the different steps. I tend to think exactly the same way.
I will let them, in a way, because I'm playing all of the scenarios of what they're thinking about in my head. And I'm already picturing, oh, that's a bad idea, but I don't want to tell them it's a bad idea because it may not actually be a bad idea.
That's true. Yeah.
And I want them to run through the scenarios. And if it's a bad idea, I want them to come to that understanding first and really like embrace, oh, okay, I see what, you may not have said your hesitation, but you had some hesitation, and now I understand exactly what you were talking about, kind of thing. And so that's really a thing. And so, okay, so back to Van Nystedt's video. It basically was talking about how people, and I think I illustrated it with just my example of it's just like how people think in pictures, and that there is a different way of understanding the world, and in how he was illustrating that was through very architectural methods. He was talking about, this small little seaside village in Mexico that he absolutely loves. He was talking about how they board up the windows, thinking about all of these different things. And he basically took a mental picture of how they boarded up these windows and all of these other things, and basically in part of his video, he does kind of like a little paper diorama of some of these things and how the thinking is and how, illustrating how
why it is how it is
and stuff. And it's so interesting to think about because I've never really thought about it, but I will honestly say there are really two types of architects and they are what was the exact, it wasn't visual learner, but
object. I think it had something to do with objects.
Yeah. So
it was like a visual object learner. And then there were like word learners.
Right.
I can't remember.
And really, if you think about it, if you think about the dynamics of, like, say, people within the project structure, like project managers, and there's even different types of like project managers that I'm learning. It's like I'm a different type of project manager than, like, say, a kind of numbers project manager, somebody who is far more comfortable running the contracts and, things like that, which, is just, I will go to the grave hating all of the
And you
administrative part of
shouldn't do
things.
that stuff because you suck at it.
I
Like you just
suck at it.
shouldn't. There should be somebody who is really amazing at that, filling out that piece of the puzzle, because that's what they're good at. That's what they love to do.
Yeah.
And by forcing you to do something like that, I mean, there's just no good ending
And,
to that.
and I will sit back and I will critique what I think I should know more of. And it's things like that. And then I think, but the people who know all of that don't know half the stuff I know.
Yeah, right.
So,
and there's way too many things to know.
And there's way too many. Exactly. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. It's that let's set up, and I had this conversation with a principal at the firm because we were talking about getting me, now that this project is somewhat winding down and going to another project. And, he was talking about a couple of projects that he knew I'd be very excited about, which I am. And this would be the kind of like dynamic. And I'm like, you know what, that's actually makes a lot of sense because I'll be taking over kind of like this aspect and they'll be working on that aspect. And it plays to the strengths of each of the people. There are those people who'd be like, oh, I can't believe they put this person in charge of me, or like I'm going to be threatened by what they do. And it's just like, that doesn't do any project any good. If you just stack it with people who are going to be like, I don't want to be, told what to do kind of thing. It's just like, well, can you do it? Well, no, I can't. Well, then guess what? You're going to need to be told what to do, or you're going to need to work with that person and stuff like that. And I've been having a lot of, maybe this is something for, a later conversation, but I've been having a lot of conversation about, we were doing a lot of after action review of this current project that I'm on. That's been 2.5 years of design work. I mean, that's a long time to be working on just like really the design and documentation phase of something. And, there's been ups, there's been downs, there's been a lot of like just
a lot of sideways.
And we had a good heart to heart about like, okay, what were the successes and the failures of this? And a lot of it is like project dynamics, experience dynamics, personality dynamics. And those are things that most of the time people don't take as seriously as they should when when they're putting together a project, because they just like, oh, Evan, you just came off of this project. Hey, I'm going to go throw you onto Cormac's project. Cormac's been begging for help and, you're going to help. You and I may not work together well on this, or we might actually have the same tools for a project, but I need something
redundancy.
else. We don't, and projects don't need that. And there's so much lack, let me just say, lack of effort in project dynamics that really tend to lead to a lot of burnout, a lot of resentment, a lot of like, oh, my career's not going anywhere, especially here, I'm going to go somewhere else kind of thing. And it's just, I always ask everybody, what do you want to get out of this project? Not like, what role do you want to do? Do you want to do bathroom details, or do you want to do ceiling details or things like that? I don't care about that. You're going to do them anyway. Like, we're all going to do them. You're going to do them. I'm going to do them. Everybody's going to do them. Because that's what it's going to take. But what do you want to get out of this project? What do you want to learn? What do you feel like you don't know that you think this project can help you learn to further advance your career and your experience and your understanding of architecture? And if you never start a project with that ideal in mind, in my own personal opinion, or at least my own personal experience, you're setting yourself up for failure. And, there's been projects where I've worked on where we've just kind of like rushed through it, and it's literally a fire drill from start to finish. And you're just like, well,
there's no North Star.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just like, well, what did you learn? What did you want to learn from this project? I learned that I didn't want to do this project. And so, it's really interesting to think about how that, I don't know, that dynamic really sets you up for success or failure.
I think the interesting thing about his video is it just really talks about the different kinds of brains that are out there. And obviously he's inspired from Temple Grandin, who is, like she, a self-proclaimed visual thinker, and how she would present herself, because she said, I think it was kind of she was just saying, like, I was a terrible speaker. I couldn't get up and here she is giving a TED Talk, right?
Right.
Nowadays, but back then she didn't feel confident in her personal presentation. And so she would let the drawings that she did do the speaking for her. And that's how she won a lot of work in the cattle industry, where she was prolific, right? Ultimately.
Right.
But her drawings were beautiful. And it's amazing to me to think about the parallels to architecture between what she did and what Van does, even on his YouTube channel, where he's creating these little paper dioramas and things. And like, are they perfect? No, they're perfectly imperfect though. And the visual communication style is what architects are good at. And it's interesting to me to think about the parallels of letting the work do the speaking. And I mean, this also leads to downfalls for architects too, right? It's like the work speaks for itself, and we'll get work because of how good the work looks. And so that isn't necessarily true either, but we do fall back on these crutches and we do tend to like group together with this personality traits, or the DNA, the wiring that we have, and it is really interesting to think about it. So I would highly recommend that architects watch that video.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. It's when I was watching that, I was just like, it's like when I'm trying to explain something, 9 times out of 10, it will always be some form of visual way of explaining things.
My wife hates this, right? It's like, I just want to draw you a picture. I don't have time for that. Just tell me in words. And I'm like, but it's not going to work. Like,
well, I mean,
do it.
I use my hands. I talk with my hands a lot. And so during ACE is a great example. Is like, we have all these different mentors, and the way that this particular ACE program was a lot different from, the other ones. It was kind of interesting because it had all of people were in like, this big group, in this big room, and they were just broken up into tables, and like some of the lead mentors would like walk around and they would like ask questions and stuff. The program organizer for ACE Detroit is a structural engineer. And so she came up and she was asking them about different forces. The kids were, like thinking about that. And so I was like,
describing them with words, and
she was describing them with,
you're like, what?
Well, exactly. It was just like, everything was like zipping past them and stuff. And I was like using my hands, and I was just like, think about like these forces and like compression and tension, and like I was using my hands,
using your double jointed knuckles to show
exactly
deflection,
like deflection, and all these other things. It's just like
freaking me out. Everybody's got to watch the YouTube version of this. Like, Cormac's a hand speaker. This is where just a reminder, subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can see his crazy man claws in action here. Ugh. Maybe you don't want to see this. I don't
know. You're welcome. Or the great thing that they did, though I wasn't a big fan of them giving me a Microsoft Surface tablet or Surface laptop, was at least it was a writable surface that I could sit there and I can pull up the annotate tools and zoom and start sketching over things. And I sketch in such detail that I literally could sketch to scale, just draw something out to them. But more so when I'm doing things like that and I'm like actually showing them the detail, I'm explaining to them the why of the detail. And walking through it and showing them, like, I'll like draw the forces on like a bracket and say, well, this is why we put, a bolt here and here below, both above and below the bracket, so that, if you've got this overturning motion, how to like put in a bolt, the carrier and all of this other stuff, and just talk through it all so that they really understand exactly what it is. But
because you just know that stuff intuitively, you already know.
And so and what's funny is it's just like, they'll say, well, write it down. I'm like, oh, I mean,
just transcribe what I just said.
Like,
there you go.
Here it is. What don't you understand about this?
It is interesting for us visual people to understand that there are people who need the words. Right?
Exactly.
And that we are different, and that we communicate differently and learn differently. Yeah. One of the interesting things that he said in that video was that there are people who love IKEA instructions and there
No,
are
my
people
goodness.
who hate IKEA instructions. And
I'm
it's
a
funny
fan.
because I've never thought about that. I've always loved IKEA instructions. I never
Yeah.
thought about the people who hate them.
I don't even to me, there are no words other than
There aren't.
numbers.
Right.
There's numbers, it's just like you're supposed to have,
3
5,
of these, 5 of these.
5 Flugenbolts, you know.
Right.
But I mean, it's just like I just put together. I got a kind of like a small love seat for my daughter's room, and it came with all the different size bolts, and it's just like so
It's
okay.
like not
And
these
so
bolts.
and so I
X.
just lay them all. I lay them all out to count everything. And I'm supposed to. All right, I'm supposed to have 4 of these, 4 of these, 4 of these, 4 of these. Check, 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 check. Got them all. And then
It's like Legos.
I
Yeah.
honestly, here's the funny thing. I don't actually have to turn to the next page. All I have to say is, this is all of the stuff that you need. And then I'll start looking at all the pieces. I'm like, oh, this goes here, this goes here, this goes here, this goes here, this goes here. And then
Right.
I'll go back and I might flip through the instructions and say, okay.
It's also
Oh,
because
this
you've
is
done it
because
before. You've
oh,
done
yeah,
something,
yes.
some other IKEA, like that does help for sure.
Having the experience at IKEA, yes, and
But
plenty of experience
that's
at
where
IKEA.
wisdom is, right? It's not just the checklist of things, but
True.
the wisdom does come in from the experience of doing
Well,
it before.
well, it's funny is like, so I've had my son on numerous occasions. I've had him there helping me change brake pads or, swap out rotors and all of this other stuff. And he's gone through it. And so now he's back from college and he's starting to drive my wife's car more and more. And I was just like, before you really get crazy, I need to change the brakes. And he's just like, well, if you just get the material, I'll go ahead and change them. I
tear.
It's just
falls.
like, here, hold on, yeah, let me dab my tear. Because yes, it was totally,
Right.
it was just like, wow, he's,
Aw.
now granted, I would totally be out there to make sure that he, because he's only changed brakes twice.
Well, you teach him once, then you supervise, and then you let him fly, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I want to let him fly, but I also don't want him to die.
Not that kind of fly. There's so many cool little points in that video.
Oh.
And then watching her TED Talk, I think I've seen it before, but it was great to watch it again and think about it. The whole argument, maybe we can wrap up with this one. We're an hour in already, but this idea of, he held up the book in his video, Matthew B. Crawford's Soul Craft.
Oh, yes.
I'm trying to remember it exactly. It's totally escaping me right now, but it's Soul. I can't even remember now.
I'm going to pull it up because I have it in my Audible library. Because you recommended it to me.
Yeah, it's an amazing book, and it made me want to read it again. But it is incredible. But it really talks about the value of blue collar work, and
Right.
This comes from a guy I think who has a degree in psychology, who went to work for a big think tank in like DC or New York and was a total knowledge worker, total white collar cubicle think tank, and then started up a motorcycle maintenance and repair shop, right? And it like went the pendulum swung the other way. So what's it called?
Shop Class as Soulcraft.
Thank you. I had soul in there too many times. Yeah. Shop Class as Soulcraft.
Yeah.
By Matthew B. Crawford. And incredible book. And the whole idea of, the real strong push for STEM classes now, which is completely different than the shop classes that we had when we were kids. And, I had architectural drafting, there was wood shop, there was metal shop, there were art classes. A lot of these have been removed from education, primary, middle school, high school education over the years. And now we're kind of trying to slip STEM classes in as maybe a replacement for these, right? But it's not. It's still very cerebral. It's still very abstract, and it's not hands-on making things with your hands, right? And so that's where the hands-on part comes in, right? But it's just interesting to me. Like that's how that you talked about being mechanical. That's actually all I want to do is make stuff, right? And And because there is such an intimate connection with the things, like I have so many tools. I love my tools. I have patina. I've made tools to make other things even.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about tech, actually, is making tools, the making tools part of it that enable people. The whole point of tools is leverage, right? To be able to do things that you can't do with your body. And you have a tool that makes something possible. It's the same with digital for me. And so this idea of this whole class of people is missing of current and future generations. And we see this in our offices today, this disconnection of how to put things together, of understanding how these pieces, when they go together in a certain way, achieve this specific outcome, because it is so paper thin. Everything that's going on in school is paper thin. And there may be an understanding of the theory, but there's no application of the theory. There's no experience of the application. And it's sad to me that doesn't exist anymore, and that there hasn't been enough of an understanding of the value of that in education, but also even today in an architectural office where we don't let people go to job sites because there's no time. Right. Or there's some insurance risk, or there's some BS story about how architects can't get involved in that part of the process. Right. And so that to me is the real disservice, where I have a big fear for the future of our profession.
Absolutely. Because talking about all of that, the lack of the shop class and stuff, I mean, I actually learned better. I learned mathematics better when I understood the application of it. So, or physics. Physics was one that once I really started to understand like the mathematics behind the mechanics, which is physics, then I started to understand physics a hell of a lot easier, because I understood, oh, that's what a lever is. That's what this is. That's what that is. All of these simple notions of teaching. And that's the thing is, like, and my wife, we talk about this a lot. And she actually, again, when we were watching that video and stuff, she was just like, a lot of times I will start to, I can identify the way these kids early on, because she's an elementary school teacher. And she starts to recognize that there are people, kids who are learning differently. And so she's like, okay, how do I get them actively engaged in learning? Because the curriculum as it's set up, which is kind of more STEM based,
there's no place for them.
They are not going to succeed that way. And people start to give up on those kids. Oh, well, that kid's just a dummy or whatever, and she'll say, no. The kid learns differently, and we need to teach that kid differently. And
you have to acknowledge that.
And
it's weird, because the school education system is a machine to process students to pass tests, right? Which is the indicator, which is the KPI for schools to get funding. Like it is a completely screwed up, in my view, system.
I can't even imagine my kids doing the CO2 powered cars down the hallways like we did. It was a blast. I loved it. We, not only did we
learned by doing it,
we learned, we learned about propulsion. We learned about, we actually did math problems about, the velocity, distance, and all of this other stuff. Again, applied physics. We actually did hands-on applied physics. And that's what all of these like shop class in home ec. I love taking home ec. Why? I'm a great cook. If I pat myself on the back there, I am a great cook. And a lot of it came from going to home ec classes. And I love doing that. I can sew. I can do all of these things. I've taught my kids how to do a lot of those things. But I learned all of that in school. We just don't do it anymore. And I kind of wish that we did, because there is a place for like these visual learners or learners of a different processes. I don't think I would have a place in modern school right now.
Well, this directly affects our industry. We talk about labor shortages in construction all the time in the trades. Like and how uncool has it become to be a tradesman in the last 30 years? Like it just wasn't even an option for teachers or parents to tell their kids about. of course it's happened in some ways, like it has somehow still happened in a very small percentage compared to what it used to be.
Right.
And like you talk about like the end times, right? You talk about the apocalypse. Who needs a plumber? Everybody. Who needs an electrician? Everybody. How much do they charge? A lot, right? Like is whatever they'll charge is what you'll pay, right?
Exactly.
Because that's what you need.
Do you know
Compare
how to
that
do
to
it? No.
architecture. Compare that to architecture, where it's a commoditization race to the bottom of architectural fees, right? It's like charge less and less. Plumbers, electricians charge more and more. Like it's absolutely crazy how the tables have turned in that way, but it's also supply and demand, right? Where architecture schools are pumping out white collar cubicle workers who are just going to go work for the Genslers of the world to, you know, keep the machine running. And anyway.
No, I totally agree with. It has like a direct effect on like our understanding of, you know, basic mechanics, basic structures, basic materials, and all of that other stuff have a direct effect on how we design. You know, because if you don't understand the limits of the materials that you're working with, you're just going to say, oh, you're going to take whatever you're designing at face value. It's just going to be, oh, like this is the standard details, and I'm just going to like work around the standard. Exactly.
Copy paste.
You know, and the one thing that I love doing is stretching materials, you know, to their break. Like I actually had, you know, the fin detail that I did on the school at Washington University in St. Louis, that fin detail didn't exist in their repertoire. They had a fin detail, but it didn't cantilever like that. And I was asking them to cantilever 4 feet, and they're like, our terracotta doesn't cantilever like that. And I'm like, is there a way that we can do that? And I was like, what if we run the structure inside the terracotta fins, and you bolt together, and so you're really not actually cantilevering per se.
Create a rigid frame.
You're creating a rigid frame.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, well, let us, you know, run back to our engineers and run that through. And now we came to a compromise, and I only was allowed to cantilever 3 feet, but it didn't really change.
Always start with a bigger number, Cormac. This is the rule of negotiation.
It didn't change the overall dynamics.
I want to cantilever 8 feet.
Yeah. But guess what is now in that manufacturer's repertoire?
And you've done it, and now somebody else can do it.
And now somebody else can do it.
You've shown that it's possible.
Exactly.
And maybe somebody else will figure out a way to push it even farther.
And hopefully they'll do a hell of a lot better than I did it. You know, I mean, I will be offended. In fact, I'll be
right. No, you'll see that, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna try to push back and go even farther next time.
Exactly.
Cool stuff.
I'm going for the 8 feet though.
Right. Well, highly recommended video. I'm so glad that you sent those. I hadn't seen Van's video. I'm obviously aware of Temple Grand, but it was also cool just to see kind of the profound effect that her words had on him. And so we'll put links to the podcast that he referenced, the TED Talk that she was in, and then of course his video as well. Just subscribe to all of his videos because they're genius.
Amazing. They really are. Spirited Man.
Spirited Man channel. That's right. All right, man.
All right.
Good talk.
Thanks.
Until next time.
Yep.